I found myself on the hub as a minor. My friend explained why it would be almost impossible to have the video removed. When I was 16 years old, I had an abusive boyfriend who was 19 at the time. He was a piece of crap who would record our intimate encounters behind my back, and even when I expressed my concerns about the videos to him, they said they were only for his viewing. I ended up breaking up with him when I was 18 after he hospitalized me, and I think he uploaded the videos as revenge. The problem is, I have searched for him and I cannot find a trace of him. It's almost like he has disappeared. The videos are pretty old and quite disgusting. The videos have also gathered more than 1 million views in total and were stumbled upon by a male friend of mine. Thankfully, you can only see my face in a couple of shots. But it's still something I desperately want to remove from the internet. I tried reporting the video a few days ago and asked for it to be taken down, but I got no response. I emailed my friend who works in cybertech and is knowledgeable on stuff like this, and the response I got really bummed me out. I explained my situation to him in the email, and here is the gist of the response: I'm glad you came to me with this. As you know, work in cyber, and give online safety advice as part of my side business. One of my specialist skills is OSINT. That is, finding information online. Unfortunately, it's going to be difficult to remove it all. There are however things you can do. One way you might tackle this is in the same way as a lady named Shannon Morse, who learned SEO after a similar event. She literally trained the search engines to redirect users to a letter that explains why searching further for the content is not cool. Typically we'd need to find the video, minimize the amount it's published, redirect users who might still be looking, and learn how to move on and deal with this if it ever arises again in the future. One good thing is, you were a minor at the time. Of course that's not generally good, but it adds weight when we send takedown requests, and it may be possible to involve law enforcement. Because of this, we should even be able to get it removed from archives that store old versions of sites. As you know, the internet is a effed up place, and unless you truly find someone who is higher up the ladder than me, I can't guarantee you with any amount of certainty that the video will be removed. I can of course help minimize the views it garners, but not much more. He proceeded to then ask me out for coffee, which I thought was a very not classy move. I'm 22 years old and just received the news I'm dying. I failed at life and am now leaving behind a 3-year-old daughter. Last week I got the news that I am dying from lung cancer. Turns out smoking since I was 15 and then upping it to 3 packs each day a few years ago was a bad idea. Stupid, I know. I thought it wouldn't come so soon though. It's stage 4 and as of now I have months to live. Please don't feel bad for me. I've done nothing good in life, except have my daughter, who is going to be really sad about losing me. I have no family because I grew up in the foster system and moved out at 18. My daughter's father is in prison for life for roping and unaliving his sister because she owed him substance money. My daughter is only 3. We don't live in a good area, and when I go to work I have to leave her with an elderly neighbor that always gets her name wrong every day. I don't want her to grow up like I did, in that foster care system. I feel like it's the reason why I messed up and did nothing good with my life. Yeah, I know it's not the only reason, and my own stupidity caused most of my issues, but if I just had some family or a support system to keep me in check it could have been better. I just want to give her some chance to have a better shot than I did. The thing is I do have an idea for who could take care of her. One of my closest friends is a co-worker at my job, and she's amazing. While I'm at the bottom of the job, she's their prized worker and makes seriously good money. She has a good husband and a kid. I want to ask her if she would be okay with adopting my little girl once I'm gone. But I know it won't go well. The thing is, my co-worker and her family are black, and me and my daughter are white. There is no way I can ask my friend to adopt my daughter and force her to deal with those kinds of issues an adoption like that will bring to her family. But then that just leaves my little girl to grow up like I did, in a crappy system with only a will of about $1,000 to help her and a necklace my mother had that I'm going to give her. I don't know if I should bite the bullet and ask my close friend if she is willing to take my daughter, or just suck it up and try to work as hard as I can to get as much money into my will for my girl. But either way, I failed as a mother. And that is a regret I am literally taking to my grave.
I'm sleeping with a former student of mine and we are truly in love. It's been 10 years since I taught her, but my friends tell me it's still weird. So 10 years ago I was teaching a 6th grade English class, and like most teachers, I had a favorite. Her name was Kaylee and she was an adorable, and incredibly mature girl. She was a very bright student, and I remember thinking to myself that when she grows older whoever she ends up with is going to be a lucky man. I think it was clear to everyone that she was my favorite, as I would pick her to answer questions the most, spent the most time helping her with assignments and so on. However, she was probably the only non-delinquent in that class, and I truly have no idea how she ended up in this class, or even at school in general. My fondest memory of teaching her is when she stayed in for lunch because she needed help with a math assignment I specifically gave to her. She was so ahead of the rest of the class I would give her middle school math to keep her occupied. At the end of the lunch when I helped her out, I blew an air kiss at her as she was leaving and she did the same thing back. I know it sounds creepy on paper, but it was honestly nothing more than appreciation for her as a student. I also want to add that there was nothing I ever did that would be considered creepy or inappropriate. I'm not weird. I remember being quite sad at the beginning of next year as Kaylee had transferred schools and was now in middle school. I didn't hear from her until about a year ago, when we reconnected through Reddit. I told an innocent story from my classroom on an Ask Reddit post, and it involved an incident with a fellow student from a class. She clearly saw it and sent me a DM, asking if I was Mr. S. After I replied, asking how she knew, she told me that she was Kaylee. It was surreal. It was by sheer chance that we reconnected, but I'm so glad that we did. We quickly exchanged emails and started talking that way. Reminiscing on old memories and catching up on life, as it had been around 9 years since I taught her and she was now 21 and in junior year of college. She was studying philosophy, and as someone who has read a great swath of philosophical literature, I discussed philosophy with her. We got into a Freud versus Jung debate through email. I honestly had no ill intentions at the start, but at one point I found myself asking if we could continue this debate over coffee sometime. She replied yes enthusiastically. When we met up for coffee, I was in awe at just how mature she had become. She was now a fully fledged woman, 21 years of age and very beautiful, with the brains to match. We got to catching up, and it honestly looked like we were a couple. By the end of our coffee date, I began to suspect that she found me attractive. Before we parted ways, I decided to shoot my shot with her. I'm a single man in his late 30s, and even though she was my previous student, now that she is well past legal age, I truly saw nothing wrong with it. I asked her if she would like to go for dinner with me sometime, and she said yes. The next week we met up for dinner, and long story short, she ended up back at mine and we had intimacy. We went for 3 rounds, and it was honestly the best intimacy of my life. Before I continue, there is something you must know, and that is I did not own her in any way, and there is no way I pressured her into this. Despite being in my late 30s, I exercise a lot, I'm in very good shape, take care of myself and have been told by many that I am conventionally very attractive. She slept with me on her own will, and there was no power dynamic and coercion involved. Anyway, back to the story. This intimate encounter of ours sparked an intimate relationship. We would see each other once a week or once every 2 weeks, and quickly seeing her became the highlight of my life. I started developing serious and intense feelings after sleeping with her a few times, and I confided this in her, and she said she felt the same. However, she said that we could not be in an official relationship until at the very least she is out of college. So that's where we are at right now. We are exclusive, we do not see other people, but we are not a couple either. She comes over to mine, or I come over to hers roughly once a week. We catch up, watch TV, maybe go out to dinner, and sleep together. She's amazing. But one problem I have is my friend group. I have confided in them about this relationship of mine, and they all seem to be very hesitant about it. They all argue that our age gap, as well as the fact I used to be her teacher, is extremely weird, and some of them have even cut me off because of my relationship with Kaylee. It upsets me a lot, as these are the same people I have supported through thick and thin, and the fact they're willing to turn their back on me really does hurt a lot. My crazy religious parents refused to let my 17-year-old sister terminate her pregnancy after she got coerced into intimacy by her 23-year-old boyfriend. My parents are very, very religious, to the point that it is almost a nightmare to live in the home. I am homeschooled by my mother, and she makes me do Bible study, learn scriptures, and instead of teaching me any sciences, she teaches me things about God. Both of my parents are the stereotypical religious types too. They hate gay people, they believe that they are abominations, they fully believe that Christianity is the true way of God and that all other religions are naive, and will face the truth come judgment day, as my dad says. One of my fondest, or rather worst, memories of my dad to date, is watching him get into a screaming match with an atheist at a Walmart when I was 8 years old. This was a random stranger my dad had never met, by the way. The man was wearing a cross, and my dad commented on it saying he likes encountering another man of faith. The man responded by telling my dad that although he wears the cross, he is an atheist. My dad was puzzled, and even angered at this. He then asked why he wears the cross. The man said something I can never forget. My mother was deeply religious. She never judged me for it. I never believed myself, but she never forced her way onto mine. She passed away a few years ago and she was the most important person in my life. Although I stick true to my own beliefs to this day, I wear it as a memory of her. These words still resonate with me today, and one other thing that resonates with me is my dad's palpable reaction to the man's response. You'd expect a grown man to accept this viewpoint and see it as rational, but my father is far from rational. He went on to call the man's mother a fake believer, and stated that she was doing a disservice to God by letting her son walk the path of sin. The man understandably got mad at this remark, and an argument ensued. My dad took the argument too far by calling this man's mother a beach, and the man proceeded to sock my dad. They separated ways after security split them up, and my dad was left with a bleeding lip. Another thing that my parents hate is termination of pregnancies, which brings me on to my current issue. I have a sister who is 17 years old, and she is now 8 weeks pregnant with her boyfriend's child. This would normally be no issue, as even though she is young to be pregnant, this is not something out of the ordinary for religious communities like my parents. However, the circumstances of her pregnancy are quite vile. First of all, her boyfriend is a man 23 years of age and they have been dating for about a year and a half. The way they began dating was through my parents. The man is the son of my mother's friend, and a good Christian man as she puts it. He holds all the values she regards highly, and desperately wanted to match him with her daughter. The fact my sister was 15 at the time honestly did not cross her mind. Even the fact that my sister herself protested, did not mean much to her. She was dead set on uniting the two families. And so they started dating. Their relationship is intimate, as my sister has confided in me. She says that although she does not count it as rope, she is always deeply uncomfortable when having intimacy with him. It's quite odd, considering they are not married, and you would expect my parents to be against premarital intimacy, but I suppose not. 4 weeks ago, my sister explained the circumstances of how she became pregnant, and she said that she was basically coerced into doing it without protection. She has never done it this way before, but her boyfriend really wanted to try it, and no amount of her saying she was kind of uncomfortable with this idea made him back off. She eventually relented and let him do it. 4 weeks later she found out she was pregnant. She freaked out, and I was the very first person that she told. Me and her have always been very close, and hearing this truly broke my heart. Then a few days ago my sister came to me again looking very upset. She told me that she told our parents about it, and they were overjoyed, but then gave out to her for not telling them sooner. She argued that she told them just a few days after finding out, but my mother argued that this was not soon enough. Regardless, my parents are both ecstatic to have grandchildren and are over the moon. Well, when my sister broke the news to them that she wants to terminate the pregnancy, all hell broke loose. She says that she tried to explain why she wants to terminate, that she doesn't love her boyfriend and that he basically roped her into becoming pregnant, but my parents did not listen. None of her explanations mattered to them, they kept telling her no, and that if she even considers something as unholy and evil as this that they will disown her, shame her to the entire community, and make everybody in the town aware that my sister is a baby K-year. This has impacted my sister deeply, and she is very scared of this. She knows that my parents aren't bluffing either. A few years ago they spread a rumor about my aunt cheating on her husband because she converted to atheism, so this type of spiteful and vengeful behavior is not out of character for my parents. I really want to help my sister terminate the pregnancy, but I have no idea how to. My entitled stepbrother scammed my neglectful dad out of his disability checks for years. I resorted to extreme measures to ruin them both. In 1990, when I was just out of middle school and my sister was still in elementary school, my dad met his third wife at a gas station known for illegally dealing over-the-counter substances in our town. They soon moved in together, and my dad abandoned us in our basement apartment to live on a shanty houseboat that didn't run, to live with her. He would show up every other week and give me $40 for groceries. Eventually, someone figured out the situation and called my mom. We went to live with her, which was, believe it or not, worse. My dad and his shanty wife got married in 1991. Not long after, she called me and told me my dad's brain tumor had returned, it hadn't, and that he couldn't handle the stress of being around us. That the only people he could bear to be around was her, and her son, Shorty, who was my age. When I called my dad to ask if this was true, he said it wasn't, and he just couldn't believe that she would say that to begin with. That was one of our last conversations until 2 years ago. Leading up to this though, the 3 decades we didn't speak were uneventful. I worked my way through college, living in my car from time to time. My dad and I were no contact, but I heard from family bought a house and put his son Shorty through some vocational classes. When my grandmother died, Shorty and shanty wife showed up in a truck and took all the furniture and anything else that wasn't tied down or already gone. Eventually, I went no contact with my dad's side of the family. I struggled for years, decades really, but I made it. And I have a great job and a good family now. The best revenge is living well, right? Wrong. 2 years ago I got a call from my dad's brother Alan. He told me my dad was in a nursing home in another state and I needed to go see him because he needed my help. Shorty had ghosted him. The nursing home, coincidentally, was about 20 minutes from my house. And I saw an opportunity and I went. The reunion was underwhelming. I didn't want to make amends, but I did want to hear how he wound up dumped and all alone in another state. And it was a really, really good story. Shanty wife got lung cancer and put my dad in a nursing home before she died in 2017. She suffered, and I was happy to hear it, but sad it wasn't butt cancer. Shorty became his power of attorney, POA, when she died, and had been visiting my dad, living in my dad's house with his 2 children, and taking care of my dad's affairs since his mom died. But now he was MIA, and my dad was worried about him. He asked me to drive the hour and a half to his house to check on everything. That's all he wanted. He never even asked me how I had been. I agreed to go, I think out of morbid curiosity. I'd never even been to my dad's house. I did want to see where he lived with his real family for 30 years. I wanted to see what could have been my life. It was 50 shades of effing awful. The grass hadn't been cut all summer. You couldn't get to the front door because of the overgrowth. There were 3 pickup trucks in the yard, 2 were full of trash. Cabs and beds and backseats, just trash. Mail, clothes, paper, shoes, garbage bags. I couldn't understand it. My dad's handicapped modified SUV was on 4 flats and full of garbage, too. I didn't have a key, so I just walked around. From what windows I could look through, the inside was in shambles and hoarded to hell. On the front and carport doors were dozens of notices from the city that they were going to condemn the place. The carport was also hoarded. Boxes and boxes stacked on each other, most rotting from the rain. The yard was full of garbage. Broken Christmas ornaments, more shoes, rusted tools, old toys. There was a letter in the mailbox notifying him that since the house was abandoned, mail would not be delivered anymore. That night, I Googled powers of attorney and how to use them. I went back the next day and showed my bedbound dad the pictures on my phone. He vowed to beat Shorty's butt, then asked me to help more. I told him I would, but he'd have to sign power of attorney over to me. All of it, durable and medical. If he didn't, he could figure this out by himself. He agreed, so I set about finding a lawyer who would drive to another state and do the paperwork in the nursing home. Bless that lawyer for being so good at his job, because all I did was tell him what I knew, and he put together a beautifully bulletproof POA. It was full of stuff I didn't even know I would need. He also filed the paperwork to revoke Shorty's POA. And now I'm unstoppable. We're from a small, rural town, and it's the kind of creepy, landlocked place that, no matter how long you've been gone or how far away you've been, when you go back, you'll see someone you know. Even if you don't know you know them. It's like playing 7 degrees of everybody, all the time. It's suffocating. But it can also be helpful. I got to work the next morning. I didn't know how scorched the earth would be when I finished, and I didn't want Shorty or anyone from his prolific, inbred family trying to find me, so I made sure nothing I did had my name on it. I opened a Google account for my dad and got a Google number. I opened a P.O. box for him in his town. I put in a mail forwarding notice. I pulled his credit report. I took the POA to my dad's small town bank, changed the address on his accounts and got new account numbers. I requested copies of every transaction back to the day Shanny wife had died, about 13 months worth. I had to go to the main branch, 2 hours from my house, the next day to pick the records up. I sat in the lobby all afternoon, going through the account. I cornered a service rep and got a crash course in his debits and deposits. This is when I figured out the extent of Shorty's staggering stupidity. My dad got about $5,000 a month in disability and social security every month. Twice a week, Shorty was going into a branch and withdrawing cash. All of the cash. For 13 months. And every time he did it, as the POA, he had to sign a form stating that he was acting on behalf of my dad, and that form was notarized by the bank. I went through every withdrawal and got the bank to confirm that every one of them was made by Shorty. Then I went to the house and called a locksmith. I knew it was bad, but I had no idea what was waiting for me there. He got the first door open, and the stench rolled out like a fog bank. We both gagged. 2 locks later, I was so embarrassed by what he had to see and smell, I gave him a $60 tip. And, with shiny new keys in hand, I called the cops. I told them I was POA for my dad, was checking on his house, and there were 3 vehicles there that didn't belong to him. He asked me if I knew who they belonged to. I said no, and I wanted them towed. He told me to call a tow company and he would meet them there. They showed up with 2 wreckers. The tow truck guy got out and asked me for a signature. I only signed my first name. As I was signing, he asked, "Do you know Shorty?" Running on pure hatred at this point, I surprised myself. "Do you?" I asked. He said he did, and that he's an a-hole. I responded, "He might be. Hey, can you do me a favor? If you see him, will you tell him I am coming for him?" His bravado evaporated. He knows a crazy dude when he sees one. They towed the trucks. When everyone was gone, I opened the door in the carport to peek in. The sun was going down and it was dark in the house. I heard something faint, and after some seconds realized it was the roaches and the rats doing their roach and rat stuff. I could smell it all in my hair. I sat on the carport steps and watched the sun go down. I was mad. Just so cosmically livid that 72 hours was all it took to dissolve 3 decades, and here I was, stinking and listening to the rats and cleaning everyone else's crap up. Taking time away from my family, and for what? I had a coming to Jesus with myself. I could either bow out now, or double down. And the thing is, I'm tenacious. To a goddamn fault. I had to be to survive, and this was a bone I couldn't put down. The thought of Shorty's life being upended, his only source of income disappearing literally overnight, and my dad having to hear, secondhand from me, that he's broken alone, made me absolutely giddy. I desperately wanted them both to lose what they had left. So, I decided I was going to triple dog down. My racist teacher keeps forcefully searching my backpack ever since I converted to Islam, so I'm making him quit. I am currently in my sophomore year of high school and I have this teacher named Mr. D, who I have never got along with, as I feel like he has always had it out for me. I don't know whether it is because of my background or ethnicity, or simply because I'm brown, but it does for sure seem that way. Mr. D has on numerous occasions made offhanded remarks to me. "I thought you can't eat pork, isn't your whatever against it? Wait, it's fasting season, is it offensive if I eat in front of you?" he said while laughing. I remember another distinct remark of his that really rubbed me the wrong way: "Ramadan? Nah, I could never. Instead I choose Ramadan, where I only eat ramen noodles." Bear in mind, he would say all these things despite knowing I am not Muslim. The only reason he knew this is because when he made the pork comment mentioned above, I explained to him that although I'm brown, I don't follow the religion strictly and don't consider myself a devout Muslim. He seemed shocked at this, and actually had the audacity to ask me, "Aren't you guys a little extreme about your faith? What do your parents think?" I did not answer his question and simply told him I do not feel comfortable discussing this matter with him. It's no surprise I did not do well in his class, despite being quite good at math. I reported him after he asked me if I wanted my future wife to wear a hijab, because although I'm not religious, he was interested in knowing if I still held some outdated views. Sadly, nothing ever came of it, and I did not discuss the matter with anyone at all outside of school. Ever since that report of mine, Mr. D has been extremely nasty to me, and his shift in behavior coincidentally came right around the time that I converted to Islam. The reason I converted is because my baby sister was severely ill, and her chances of pulling through were very, very slim. During that time I resorted to faith for comfort. Seeing my sister pull through was a miracle, and although I am just as thankful to the doctors and specialists who took care of her, the whole experience has converted me into a believer of some form of higher power. I now consider myself truly Muslim. When I converted, I kept it on the low, of course, not intentionally, but I had no need to bolster the fact I changed my faith. Well, Mr. D caught wind of the fact I converted through a conversation I had with a friend inside his class. This was my best friend, and so he knew about the conversion, of course, and I happened to make the joke, "Now that I've converted, the school will go boom." Mr. D was not a fan of that joke at all, and after hearing it, he pulled me out of class to talk to me outside immediately. His first words when outside the classroom were, "I've heard you converted faith. Why?" When I told him I did not feel comfortable answering that, he told me if I didn't answer, he was going to have no choice but to report me for making the joke I just made. So I was forced to explain my change in faith to Mr. D. For some reason, that's all he wanted to know. He told me to go back into the classroom and did not question me further. I was baffled as to why he cared about my faith so much. Either way, I didn't think much of it. It's not like he's going to start examining me every day to make sure I don't go Oppenheimer on the school, right? Wrong. Mr. D started checking my bag on random days a few weeks later. First he would be subtle about it. He would stand at my desk and ask me if I had a copy of a certain book in my bag, and regardless of what my answer was, he would ask me to check right now. I did not notice it at the time, but he was definitely looming in to see what was in my bag. However, after finding nothing over and over, Mr. D became more forceful with his approach. I remember him keeping me after school one day to talk about my behavior issues. He stated he had reason to suspect I was a threat and I need to hand my bag over to him so he can examine it. When I refused, he told me he would tell the principal about the joke I made. I made this joke over a full month ago, and he was still dangling it over my head. However, that joke held power. As a Muslim, making a joke in school like that does not bode well for me, and I was willing to do anything not to be reported for it, so I let him search my bag. I let him do this over, and over, and over again. Mr. D spent around 2 months periodically checking my bag, maybe once or twice a week to try to find something. That was enough time for me to have enough. I wanted to embarrass him. This racist piece of crap had to leave. The mental stress of dealing with him was really getting to me. I still did not tell anyone about it, I was simply too embarrassed. So without anyone's help, I made a plan. The plan was heinous, to say the least. I found Mr. D's Facebook and took numerous screenshots of pictures of his head. It's worth noting that Mr. D is a large man, and this part came in handy. I used the pictures of his head I screenshotted, and combined them with photos I found online. The photos were photos of shirtless men with his exact skin tone and body frame. After carefully photoshopping 3 of these images together, I was set to go. It's worth noting that I am good at Photoshop and it's been a hobby of mine since I was in middle school, so I did a good job of it. I did all of this with a cheap and old laptop not registered to me in any way, shape or form, and with a blocked VPN to minimize the potential of repercussions. I then published these pictures on a very niche website which is into that kind of thing. I then wrote the link of the URL of the images onto a few pieces of paper, all while wearing gloves, and placed them in peculiar areas around school. Changing rooms, underneath stalls, anywhere where cameras were not seen. I waited for students to stumble onto them and do my work for me. It took a few weeks for anyone to notice, but notice they did. The next thing Mr. D knew was deepfakes of him without a shirt were being shared across the entire school, and he was scrambling around looking for a perpetrator. He has threatened to report these images to the police as they are fakes, but he has not been in school for the last few days. He doesn't even suspect me. I'm thinking he just quit instead of dealing with the hassle of it all. But I'm not sure, maybe when I update next I'll be in custody, who knows.